celebrating 48 years on the air. Award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, back on the radar, antibiotic resistance in animals. We chat with an expert from MSU. In Southern Gardening, Eddie says we may be in a cool season, but think baskets anyway. In the market, Zach diving deep into farm econ with more expert help from MSU. And back on the subject, a warning from the experts on antibiotic resistance. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Great to have you with us again here on Farm Week. Later in the show, we also bring you this week's feature, a focus on the use of antibiotics in animals. Specifically, we look at how bacterial resistance to antibiotics has grown into a more critical issue affecting not just farm animals, but pets and even humans. In this segment, though, I spoke to Dr. David Smith at Mississippi State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. He chairs a national committee on the subject of antimicrobial resistance. One of the doctors you'll see in today's feature serves with him on that committee. First, though, I asked Dr. Smith where we stand on this medical issue. In other words, just how serious is the situation?
It's a serious issue because in the 20th century, when we started to have antimicrobials, we solved a lot of problems that people and animals died from prior to that era. Now we're starting to see that some of those infections are resistant to treatment. And so in human hospitals and some community-acquired infections in people, and even in animals, we see that those infections are becoming more difficult to treat because the bacteria have developed resistance against the antibiotics that we use to treat those infections. You'll see stewardship being discussed in all aspects of medicine, including in agriculture, including in companion animals, including in human medicine. Antimicrobials are used in crop production as well, and so those environmental uses of antimicrobials, the term stewardship is being applied to all of those arenas where antimicrobials are being used, and that's a good conversation to have. Yeah, and I think we're aligned in terms of the way we might want to think about what stewardship is. So it's not just cutting back, but it is thinking carefully about under what circumstances an animal might need to have an antimicrobial, or are there other things that we can do to prevent them from getting sick in the first place, to avoid those infections that cause problems. If they do need antimicrobials because they do have an infection, what's the most strategic use of the antimicrobials so that we get the cure that we want for the animal without unduly selecting for resistance.
Our feature later in the show goes into more detail about resistance, so hang around for that. And by the way, Dr. Smith says resistance has actually been around since the 40s when the first antimicrobials became available.
Recently, we brought you the story of a town in Illinois known as the pumpkin capital of the world. But what about all those giant pumpkins we see this time of year? Growing a pumpkin to nearly 3,000 pounds makes even Charlie Brown say, good grief. Here's Josh Bittner with more.
All right, are you guys ready? Travis Ginger of Minnesota, here you go. What do we got? 2471, 2471.
After another cross-country haul, the current giant pumpkin world record holder fell short of his 2,749-pound feat from 2023, but still managed to top the scales again at the annual Half Moon Bay, California World Championship Pumpkin Weigh-Off. It's a meticulous feat he's achieved 4 of the past 5 years, competing with mostly West Coast growers.
I'm using a lot of biologicals, mycorrhiza, bacillus blends when I'm burying these vines in a special blend of potting soil, and then the roots just scream out the side.
Often referred to as the Super Bowl of giant pumpkins,
He's going to get a check for $22,000.
Half Moon Bay touts big prize money. $9 per pound for first place and up to $30,000 for setting a new world record. Travis Ginger might have a NASCAR look, decked out with logos from companies that sponsor his journeys, but no one grows as a full-time job. So what is the driver?
You're not going into it thinking, hey, I'm going to make a profit or something like that. But if you do, that's a bonus, right? It's really for the camaraderie of the community of growers. Everybody shares the secrets and shares the growing tips and shares seeds.
Trading seeds is important, and we always prepare to invite new growers. It's like me, you know, we always carry them and then just hand them out.
Decades ago in Mexico, University of Michigan archaeologists unearthed the earliest known proof of Western agriculture, pumpkin-related squash seeds. When Christopher Columbus arrived, they were a common indigenous crop with several varieties native to the Americas. Shipping them all back to Europe resulted in various cultural connotations, and larger tropical and subtropical specimens began to realize further potential when unleashed in northern soils. But it was William Warnock of Goderich, Ontario, Canada, who kicked the door wide open, growing World's Fair records in 1893 and 1900. Long before the Gateway Arch graced the city's skyline, lightning struck a third time as Warnock notched his final world record in St. Louis.
This is an exhibit that explores the history of the 1904 World's Fair. It's one of the largest events in St. Louis's history. Over 19 million people came to St. Louis to visit the World's Fair and to see people and products and ideas from all over the world.
Missouri public historian Adam Kloppe says Warnock's crowd-pleasing 403-pound mammoth squash, or giant pumpkin, was a record that held for over 70 years.
After the fair, it was bought by the Rennie Seed Company of Toronto for $10, and then they sold the seeds for 25 cents under the name Goderich Giant.
Though Pennsylvanian Bob Ford grew a 451-pounder in 1976, it was another Canadian, Howard Dill of Windsor, Nova Scotia, who broke the dam for the modern era. Dill's father had given Goderich Giant seeds a whirl and passed the torch to Howard. After logging 459 and 493.5-pound world records in 1980 and 81, respectively, Howard patented his selectively bred Dill's Atlantic Giants, the genetic basis for all world record giant pumpkins today.
You never know who's out there. It's going to come up big, and with the seeds, there's no limit to what the potential of these things may grow to. And if somebody has a little bit of luck and a good growing season, who's to know?
What's the giant pumpkin equivalent of I'm going to Disneyland?
Yeah, this is the giant pumpkin of going to Disneyland.
Ride a night and day out to Half Moon Bay for a memory.
If you spend much time in the garden, you already know you can magnify your landscape with hanging plants, even this time of year. In this week's Southern Gardening segment, Eddie Smith showcases cool season hanging plants. Here's Eddie.
Today I'm at Buds and Blooms Nursery in Wesson, Mississippi, admiring some of their cool season hanging basket combinations. Let's take a look at some of the plants growing in these baskets. Wave petunias make an excellent choice for hanging baskets due to their vigorous growth, cascading habit, and prolific blooms. The Easy Wave Red Velour variety stands out with its deep, velvety red flowers, adding a striking burst of color. Similarly, Easy Wave Violet petunias offer vibrant violet blooms and are another standout from the Wave series. Both varieties together in a combination hanging basket planting is a definite showstopper. Another stunning combination that caught my eye was the pairing of Candy Showers mixed trailing snapdragons with Cool Wave golden yellow pansies. Candy Showers snapdragons offer a unique trailing habit, showcasing a vibrant mix of colors. Meanwhile, Cool Wave golden yellow pansies a part of the Cool Wave series, are known for their vigorous spreading and cascading growth. Their bright golden yellow blooms make them perfect for adding a splash of color to hanging baskets during the cooler months. There are many colorful cool season hanging basket combinations available to brighten up your fall, winter, and spring. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
Time for a short break right here, but stick around. Coming up, a familiar story: antibiotic use in animals and resistant bacteria. There's beginning to be an even larger concern about the resistance, and it's not just about farm animals, but about our pets too, and us. We head to Minnesota, where veterinarians are a little concerned about resistance and about the closeness of our physical space with animals. Their message: when we're treating our animals, we're treating the whole house. A warning coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith. I believe in my own work and in the opportunity I have to make my life useful to humanity. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families that I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
In people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith. I believed that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. I believe that these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance towards the views of others. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the market report. Looks like the honeymoon's over. Prices dropping back down.
At least in ag commodities, seems reality set back in and prices back to where they were 2 weeks ago. We'll get into it, but first, the numbers. What were the week's biggest gains and losses? And then, an ag expert goes into detail on what the economy looks like this year and what you can think about pushing forward to 2025. So, markets closed the week down, a sea of red overall, with one exception. Livestock and row crops all affected. Seems prices stabilizing post-election hangover. Let's take a look. The week's only gain, lumber up $15, an over 2.5% increase from the previous week. The week's biggest loss, wheat, down 35.5 cents, a near 6.25 decrease from the previous week. This week, we take another look into how prices have affected the farmer this year. If you've been watching, you know. Not good. And how has that affected selling? Well, according to Extension expert Dr. Steve Martin, we've had trouble selling last year's crop due to low prices, and it seems this year's crop will have the same issue.
It turned out to be an expensive year, and we've looked at some of that over the summer. Our costs, as we know, the whole economy over the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of inflation, high interest rates, and so that's translated into the things we buy as producers. And hard stuff like tractors and combines, fixed cost, up about 27-30%, on average across all the things we use. And then our we refer to as variable costs, what it costs to put the crop in, they're up to maybe actually a little bit better this in 24 than they were in 2023, just from a fuel standpoint. So fuel was a little cheaper, which also translates into cheaper fertilizer prices if you're growing a crop, corn or cotton or something like that that uses a lot of fertilizer, rice, whatever. But as we all know, irrigation costs were up. Some people, I think, all the water their crop got, they spent on irrigation. And then we got toward the end of the summer, and prices went down for all the crops. It looked like we had big crops across the whole U.S. and not a lot of demand there for some of those crops. So things were looking pretty tight. Still are. I think maybe we'll survive some of that with our yields, but we need some things to go right, going forward. A lot of uncertainty out there. We were supposed to have a new farm bill for 2024. So we still don't have it farm bill. There's some opportunities there maybe to get that done before this next crop goes in the ground, but a lot of the farm policy payments are lagged a year because they tie them to the price of the crop. So the crop that we grew this year, we'll sell between now and the time we harvest next year's crop. So payments for the 2024 crop won't be here until the fall of 25. Payments on that wouldn't be till on over in late 2026. So a lot of uncertainty there that folks got to deal with as they make decisions going into 2025. If you look at things that come out of Washington in terms of payments for whatever, and it seems like there's an unlimited supply of money up there, but there's a cap on spending for the farm bill. So anything that is done to improve one or the other has to be taken away from some other part of it. So that's kind of a depressing part of dealing with that. It'd be nice if that was adjusted some kind of way where there was some additional money, and it'd be a lot of money if you or I had it in our pocket, but in the whole scheme of the U.S. budget, that's a very small part. Think about 2025 or any other year, you got two things to consider. You got what it costs to produce a crop and what you can sell it for. On the price side, 2024 was it's really all over the board nationwide and not sold, last year's corn crop. So in this year, we had people who hadn't sold 23 crop. There were opportunities early 2024 to sell $5 corn. $5.20, I think, is where the board highest it was on the December 24 contract early in this year. That's all hindsight. That's easy to say, I should have sold everything back then. You can't really blame producers for doing that, again, because you don't book your whole crop, for one, and second, we're looking at prices lower than what we had been used to. Downside of that going into 2025 is right now there's not those type of opportunities. We've got till mid 2026 to sell this 25 crop. So there's opportunities there, no guarantees, but opportunities for price improvement. One of the things marketing economists have said since I was an undergraduate is know your cost of production. And I really didn't understand that for a long time, even after I got to be an economist, because what your cost of production is really doesn't have any effect on the market. We're price takers, is what the market does. But knowing what that price, that cost of production is, gives you opportunity, especially in times like this when things are tight, to know, hey, if I book $11 beans, I can make a little money. I may not book my whole crop, but I'm going to lock some in at a profit. So knowing your cost of production is an important part.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Seems farmers can't really catch a break price-wise with some slight rallies here and there. Mike?
Thanks, Zach. Back in 2018, the FDA unveiled a new 5-year plan for supporting antimicrobial stewardship in veterinary settings. More recently, the plan became policy to fight AMR, or antimicrobial resistance, in both animals and people. Colleen Krantz of our news partner Market to Market has the encore story.
For nearly a decade, the nation's spotlight has shone squarely on livestock when it comes to antibiotic use in animals and concerns about resistant bacteria. While U.S. regulations implemented in 2017 helped drive down the sales of certain antibiotics for use in livestock by 38% between 2015, the peak year, and 2021, concerns about bacterial resistance have not eased. In response, the European Union in 2022 created greater powers in Europe that would allow them to withhold certain medically important antibiotics from animals. The European Union didn't focus only on livestock, but included man's best friend, as well as their feline counterparts and other companion animals.
We don't have those restrictions in the United States right now, but there is concern that if we don't take very good care about the way we're using antibiotics, that we're going to have problems not only with treating our veterinary patients, but potentially in human healthcare as well.
Pets have not been the primary focus of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration when it comes to preserving the effectiveness of antibiotics, particularly those used to combat disease in humans. But that may soon change. The FDA declined Market-to-Market's request for an interview, but sent a written statement that said, to date, the majority of FDA's Center for Veterinary Medicine judicious use policies have been focused on food-producing animals. However, as part of FDA's 5-year plan supporting antimicrobial stewardship in veterinary settings, CVM intends to develop and implement a strategy for promoting antimicrobial stewardship in companion animals. Researchers say that more than 60% of the roughly 1,500 known pathogens that affect humans can be transmitted between animals and humans.
It's pretty new that people are starting to evaluate antibiotic use in pets. I think the reason why food animals have been the focus for so long is because they're large, so the actual amount of drug per patient is a lot larger, say for a cow, than it is for a tiny little chihuahua. But the thing about companion animals that I think people are starting to key in on is that they share the same environments that we live in. So, you know, we have cats and dogs living in our house. We have cats and dogs oftentimes living in our beds too. They sleep with us. We share ice cream cones with them. So the interaction between those animals and humans is actually a lot closer, which means that we're likely sharing bacteria sort of in and on our bodies with those animals much more closely.
Dr. Granick is one of 3 women behind the Antimicrobial Resistance and Stewardship Initiative at the University of Minnesota's College of Veterinary Medicine. The campaign, partially supported by an FDA grant, provides information to vet clinics and performs research related to antibiotic prescription practices in pets. As bacteria mutate or adapt to survive treatment, certain antibiotics are at risk of becoming ineffective. At the University of Minnesota's Small Animal Vet Clinic, which handles some of the state's more complicated cases, they have seen a dramatic increase in pets with infections associated with resistant bacteria.
And I certainly have seen that in practice where, you know, a human has an antibiotic-resistant infection, and a dog that lives with that human comes into us and has an infection, maybe in a different location of the body, but with also the same organism, the same resistance pattern. So, you know, so the closer we are, you know, in contact with those animals, I think the greater the risk. And we're not going to get rid of our pets, right? They're part of our wellness. And so what we need to do instead is just be really careful about how we're treating our pets, because we have to recognize as veterinarians, we're not just treating the pets, we're kind of treating the whole household in a way.
If pet owners are desperate to heal a sick cat or dog, however, Dr. Granick says they may pressure veterinarians to prescribe antibiotics that may not be the best answer.
We created a handout that they can utilize and alter as they see fit, but the headline of that handout that goes home with the pet owner is, "Your pet does not need an antibiotic today," with an exclamation point, like it's a celebration, you know?
One southern Minnesota clinic that has collected data for the university's research is the Heartland Animal Hospital in Owatonna.
There's a lot of buzzwords that are associated with large animal production. A lot of those being antibiotic resistance, antibiotic use, your meat being safe or not safe. And of course, everything that's in the food chain is safe because of the withdrawals, and the producers are going to meet those withdrawals. So the challenging part is when you transfer that down to dogs and cats, of course, aren't in our food chain. So it makes it a lot different for people, and they don't realize that antibiotic resistance can happen, or antibiotic abuse, to be truthful, can happen in the small animal world as well.
Dr. Wilgerby says they're happy to get university updates on the best practices for treating various illnesses, particularly if an antibiotic has been proven unnecessary.
And so that's the challenging part as a veterinarian, is we need to balance people's expectations of their problem as well as offering solutions to the problem, but it's not always to reach for antibiotics.
Pets are not the only overlooked group of animals. Wildlife can be carriers or victims of resistant bacteria.
Great part about veterinary medicine is that as we gain more information, we can help do our job better. What would be great if it were to happen coming down the road would be suggested guidelines for antibiotic use. As far as having a duration of antibiotic and an antibiotic choice, that would be most appropriate for the condition that you're seeing. That would be handy.
Dr. Wilgerby says antibiotics are critical to controlling certain illnesses, and the cost of losing that tool is too high.
Because if we didn't use antibiotics in the world, there would be a lot of death, both for people and for animals.
A strong warning from the experts. Hopefully we can avoid the very strong measures they're taking in Europe. Well, next time, a success story in the Mississippi Delta, a Farm Week encore.
In a part of the Delta long considered a food desert, a town that played a prominent role in civil rights history. A grocery store comes to Marks, Mississippi. It was a long-awaited follow-up to our news coverage of a grand opening that put smiles on the faces of everyone involved.
And it showcases yet again just how extension matters. All that and a lot more next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See you next week. Thanks for watching.